Well, welcome back. Believe it or not, Dr. Bradley, we are heading for the final turn, the last hour of At the Round Table with Ma'am Leo.
Where did I'm good. Okay, where did the time go? I mean, wow.
And speaking of time, you lose an hour of it after 2 o'clock tonight.
And according to how the Congress vote, we might be losing it permanently.
Right. Well, we're going to spring forward.
And stay forward.
Spring forward an hour. So, folks, most clocks now, if you have it automated, they usually set themselves. But if you are from the old school and you have a plug-in or something that doesn't do that, reminder to spring forward at tonight. The clocks go forward.
Yes.
And so we're going to be heading forward. Lose an hour, but it'll get a little more daylight. You know, we've gained, I think it was 2 minutes every day or something like that. So if you notice it,
it's a little lighter when I come out early in the morning to get to the show.
Yeah. So I know. It's usually coming out in the dark.
In the dark, yeah.
I'll have to look around. Again, we want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call, area code 781-342-0252. Guarantee Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. You know, again, the calling number here is 617-282-0675, 617-282-0685. I want to thank T. Michael Thomas and First Suffolk Senator Nick Collins in our last hour talking about the issues over at the Boston Convention Center and the allegations of discrimination that are taking place there. So, folks, give your elected officials a call and say, hey, you want to weigh in. You don't think that what's happening over there is right. I want to dive into... So, Dr. Bradley, this past Thursday, folks, it's getting attention, but probably not as much as Boston community faith leaders discussed concerns about a string of violence call on city for help. And it says Boston community and faith leaders revealed a set of findings and new calls for action on Thursday in response to a recent string of violent incidents in Boston. Leaders have been sounding the alarm in recent weeks, with some criticizing city officials and pushing for change. Leaders have also continued to meet, focused on expressing concerns and finding solutions. Speaking this week, the Reverend Kevin Peterson of the New Democracy Coalition said Boston is facing a triangle of death impacting its Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury neighborhoods. That's a very powerful statement. A triangle of death impacting Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury neighborhoods. The Black Community Coalition member said remains in a state of trauma in relation to its ongoing violence. We would be a more functional city if we could have regular engagement with law enforcement in order to address problems like this, Peterson said. Peterson continued, warning Boston could be heading for a record-breaking year of homicides if the current rate continues. If we're having a death per week, we have a problem, Peterson said, noting 8 murders in the past 8 weeks. Several community leaders previously spoke out in late February. Among them, Reverend Eugene Rivers specifically spotlighted Mayor Michelle Wu. We need a new mayor because this is a disgrace. She's ducking and dodging the issue, Reverend Eugene Rivers said. Dr. Reverend Groover said current conditions were at a level that we've never seen before. City of Boston issued a statement following comments last month. Senior officials said the city said respond on scene following serious acts of violence with the goal of connecting individuals impacted with various resources. Each and every day in the city is working closely alongside our public safety officials and neighborhood partners to intervene before violence occurs, the city statement continued. Officials said work will require a coordinated approach, adding that city officials will continue to dedicate the full weight of the city departments across all neighborhoods to keep our residents safe. So, folks, what do you say? Do you feel safe? I mean, this statement here that they're quoting Kevin Peterson saying that Boston is facing a triangle of death impacting its Dorchester, Roxbury, and Mattapan neighborhoods. Dr. Bradley, if you look at and you go on, you can see it for yourself. There are little red dots that show where these homicides are taking place. They're in those neighborhoods.
I think it's going to... I'm sorry, go on.
No, I'm saying, is that language too strong? Or
no, I don't think the language is too strong. I think the language is very accurate, to be honest with you. I think the solution has to be multi-pronged.
Okay.
I think just saying that is where Mayor Wu's issue, Commissioner Cox's issue, I think is too short-sighted. I think it's a societal issue. And I think it's an issue of that really has manifested itself as a result of breaking down of the family.
Right.
You know, and so I think there are social undercurrents that are happening, and this is the result of it.
So my question to you and to our listening audience is, how do we get these parties at the table? Because there seems to be, in my opinion, a level of frustration from folks in the community that feel like the city isn't doing much. The city feels like they can't do this alone, that they need to expand their partnership. And those folks who say that they see a lot of the leadership in the city, but there's a vacuum of experience.
Well, I think one of the first things that we should do is stop pointing the fingers, you know, and stop blaming. It's not about blaming; it's about solutions.
Okay.
And I think if you actually start blaming, you're preventing bringing the necessary stakeholders in place that could probably give you a solution. And I think a part of that solution is how do we assist the family, especially those one-parent families who are trying to maintain a living in a very expensive city like Boston. You know, how do you actually, what resources you put in place to assist that mother so that you have, you know, social control help, you know, social control, and beefing up the social control units in those communities like the churches,
Right.
the after-school programs, all those different programs that we had as kids that actually put us in line when our parents were not around to check our behavior.
Right. But I don't even think you realize what you just said, right? And I'm going to go back and rewind it, because when you said assist those mothers, you didn't even mention fathers.
I know. And that was done on purpose.
But that's what I'm saying, right? Is that right there speaks volumes of the breakdown,
That's
right?
right. That's the breakdown.
Because in my home, it's mom and dad.
Yeah.
And that's just natural. In your home, it's mom and
my
dad.
mom and dad.
But you just said, you know, whether we see a lot of times this problem, and some fathers did, but there's this missing component, right? You said to assist these mothers.
Yes, but see, the thing is that when you have mom and dad, you have people there. You have a team of individual adults who actually can help our kids understand that, number one, you don't use violence to solve conflict, and you usher them through the very stages of life, even all the way up to the point where they were 22. I'm gonna give you an example. This weekend I've been freaking out because my youngest girl now has, and she's out of college now, and she just made it clear to her mother and I that she's in a relationship.
Okay.
You know, and I was like, whoa, wait, I wasn't not ready for that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But my wife said, calm down. Your dad, you're overly protective. Calm down.
Right.
Because, you know, she's 22 years old.
Right.
Don't you think it's about time?
Right.
And then I started to check myself. But, you know, I'm in place to make sure that transition is done without her being hurt or someone hurting her or hurting someone else. Is that the case when you only have one parent, usually the female? So I think a part of our problem in those communities is that, you know, we have one parent households who are trying to do both things.
We're going to take this call in a second, but I want to get your take on this. How do we, because to your point, when you think, it made me think about something, is that we have a lot of egos as well, right, on both sides, right? It's how do we get folks to check them? If the betterment is to try to find a solution or working together, because we may never find a solution because you can't forecast violence, but when it does happen, that we're working in unison, right? How do we get to there? Because there are, like I said, there are so many egos involved in that people on one side feel like they've been ignored, and now folks are in power are ignoring them in the way they feel they're being ignored.
I think, Larry, we all have egos, but the key is to select those individuals who are willing to put the ego aside. That is the key. I mean, even when we're doing our show, we all have egos. But, you know, I don't want to say, well, Larry, you know, you're doing this. And it's all about, okay, what can we do to make sure the show is successful? So I think the key to bringing those people together are finding out who are those stakeholders who are willing to put the ego to aside, so we can start talking and having real discussions about, okay, what can we do to assist this parent? What can we do to assist this particular situation? How can we beef up this particular homegrown organization, i.e. People Academy, to make sure that there are situations, there are people with skills who can get jobs, so that they'll no longer have to deal with selling drugs or dealing with the gang or dealing with all these other social entities that give them the love that they should have in the family. So you have to have those kind of conversations.
So basically, they watch this broadcast and see how we operate and see how we.
There you go.
Right.
Hello, brother.
There's no egos here.
See, I call your brother this time.
I see, you back in line. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Peace. This is me again.
Hey, peace,
Jamal
Yes,
calling.
Yeah.
So this is one of my this is a topic of interest to discuss for me in terms of the violence, the interactions, the preachers, the politicians, and so on and so forth. So the Right Reverend Dr. Kevin Peterson, from the quote you just said, you asked, was the language too strong?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say no, the language is not too strong, but what it is too dramatic.
Okay.
And it's dramatic for, effect.
I was going to say it had an effect, right?
Right. But this is also too why the streets, many people in the streets really don't like the preachers. A lot of people, like I know in the streets, there are certain, levels of thing that, people like, they respect the drug dealer. A lot of people don't like pimps. They don't like con artists that we a lot of people view those as like, the petty of the thing. So when it comes to the preachers, a lot of them seem to be using a lot of the same type of methods of the pimps and the con artists. So,
oh my God.
Okay.
I mean, no, I gotta call it out. We talking. And so for instance, what y'all just talked about with ego, like you said, everybody has an ego. Use myself for example. I know I am good at what I do.
Yeah.
The difference is I don't think that what I do is going to save the universe. Me, myself, as I am the second coming, and that's the difference.
Well, the other difference to Jamal, because I've gotten to know you and I consider you a brother, is that you're willing to work with any and everyone, right, who is willing to work for the betterment of others other than themselves. I've seen that with you, right, because I do that with you on a regular basis, right? I see you referring people to me if I can be of service to them. I see you calling
but that's because I know you're not. That's because I know you're not up to shenanigans. See, and that's what I mean.
Right, right.
So that's the point. So some of these people who are now saying, "Hey, we have the solution." I mean, okay, there's so much misinformation there. It's horrible. So first of all, we're making a new call. This is not a new call. I've seen this call probably 30 times since I've been, 15 in the 80s. Okay, so there's nothing new about this.
Right.
The clergy is once again, this segment of the clergy is once again making a play to be more involved at the city level because why? Because there's money coming down from the state, from the feds to deal with violence. Once again, they refuse to deal with the things on their watch, and they come up with sloganeering. I mean, I remember Jesse Jackson, up with hope, down with dope. It did nothing to increase hope, and it did nothing to decrease dope. But it sounded beautiful.
Right.
And so that's what
you still remember it, right? You still remember it.
And that's my point.
Right.
So why don't our children have a breath in the triangle of death? Okay, so that's cute and all that type of thing. Make a T-shirt or whatever. But at the end of the day, none of them folks is going to bust a grape in a fruit fight. And some of these people who say, hey, let me around the kids, or I got the solution, in fact, don't have the solution and shouldn't be around the kids. So what we have to do is deal with realistic stuff that is data-driven, tested and proven. And I've said it before on this broadcast, we need to find Deborah Prothero Stith.
Yeah.
Years ago, she wrote the anti-violence curriculum, and that wasn't the end-all, be-all, but it was a doggone great start to be implemented at a smaller, at a level educationally with kids from the lower levels up to teenagers and all this type of thing. We need to get on stuff that works. This doesn't work. We know it doesn't work because we've seen it over and over again, and as Larry, as you know, what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Right. Speaking of stand by, Jamal. I want to bring this other caller in. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable. I think Pastor Hobbs has him on hold still.
I think so.
So, all right.
But I think Jamal is hitting it right on the head as usual.
Yeah.
Again, how do we get to the real discussion? And, oftentimes as a community, we look for other people to give us the solution, and that solution is among us.
Right.
We need to make sure that we're having those discussions and we're implementing those ideas. on a scale that it can have a real effect on the problem.
Yeah.
We just can't continue to look to other folks. And I hate to say this, because people are like, well, we're not in that particular time, but it was different when we were kids,
Yeah.
And I would like to see some of those practices come back.
Yeah.
We need to understand that we're allowing our future to kill themselves.
Right.
So therefore, we will have no future. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. We're allowing our future to kill themselves. And I hear him when he says, this is a good slogan. I hear him when he says there's money coming down the pike, and I hear him when he says that the people, the kids, the youth don't deal with the clergy the way that they used to, because the clergy has a whole different objective. But not all clergy.
No, so Jamal and Dr. Brad, there was a recent press where Reverend Groover was calling for the BMA folks to get back together. I believe they're going to be convening this week, upcoming week, to try to see if they can convene. Some folks have their opinions about that, but I have to be perfectly honest. Like someone like myself who has almost 40 years, believe it or not, of service in law enforcement, I'm never invited to the table for the most part and asked, about my opinion or best practices and things like that. And then I see people who weren't even born when are senior advisors in an area, in an arena where I know they don't have the experience that I have. So that also is part of the problem, Jamal.
Okay, God just put this in my brain, and I love it. The analogy is going to be between the police and the preachers. Okay, so as you know, police are great at saying, "Hey, we have a softball team. Hey, we got hot dogs. Hey, we got McGruff the crime dog." Right?
Don't forget the ice cream truck. Don't forget the
ice cream truck. Right. So all these type of things, and then the people are saying, "Yes, yes, yes. Can you clean up the department, though?" Okay, so that's great. Okay, I'll take a snow cone, thanks. But what we'd really like to see, is transparency, accountability, the public records, police brutality dealt with, killing of civilians, the unfairness that happens to the black and Latino and the female officers, all these type of things. But they're like, no, McGruff, snow cones, right? So the preachers do the same thing. For the longest time, I used to go to the meetings back when they were having them more frequently, BMA, 10-Point Coalition. I literally, one of the reasons I became a minister, for those that don't know, I'm an ordained minister. Okay. And you too can get ordained. It's $35 online.
All right.
I became a minister for the distinct purpose so that they could not keep me out the meetings. Okay? So that's why I became a minister and started going to the BMA and the 10-Point Coalition meetings to challenge them. Do not be the finger pointer at the community, the moral authority. Pull your pants up. You're smoking the reefers. You're naming your little kids Takaquisha and all this type of stuff. Don't do that.
Right.
Clean up what you are in fact in charge of. Clean up your church first. Don't talk to me about the violence in the street if you ain't dealing with the sexual violence in your own church.
Right.
If you ain't dealing with the pedophilia, the molestation, the preacher that's taking money or taking some honey, all these type of things. This is another reason, a main reason why the streets don't have respect. And to Dr. Bradley's point, not all clergy, which is why I have a great relationship with Pastor Wall, because love him or hate him, ain't nobody got no dirt on him all over the years. He's been a clean man.
Right, but see, Jamal, you're making my point for me, right? Because that's why is that why people like myself and Pastor Wall are not at the table, are not invited?
That's where I'm going to go.
Because when I talk about how much you could weigh in, it's just like when I say to you, Jamal, who is your Billy Celeste of today in a leadership role, in a real leadership role in law enforcement? Do you have one? Because that's when Dr. Bradley talked about he said it many times when he saw Billy Celeste, who God rest his soul. He's one of the people. And when they told me there'll never be another Billy Celeste, I knew exactly what they were talking about. Someone who had the power, the authority, and the respect in the community in a way that they found threatening. So I ask you before Dr. Bradley weighs in, who is your Billy Celeste in the leadership today? Or do you have one?
Well, okay. So, leadership. So the closest I would say to that would have been Captain Hussein, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So he had some sort of a leadership role, but it wasn't like we could ever leverage that to really get anything super duper done.
Mm-hmm.
I knew if I made a phone call, he would answer.
Right.
But then also, too, it wasn't the type of relationship that you and I have in terms of, like, he also wasn't coming to help, feed nobody or nothing on the weekends or, none of that. So it's different levels of relationship. So in terms of leadership, I really haven't had any. My best relationships that I've had with any officers have been folks such as yourself, some of the past leadership of Mamleo and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, those folks are not in leadership. I got a great relationship with Eddie Crispin. You know what I mean?
Right.
But these are not people who can, call shots. So leadership is different.
Right, but that's the point I'm making. Is that's what I'm saying, Dr. Bradley, I want you to please weigh in, and that's what I'm talking about, right? And that's what people are saying that they want, right? Don't just put faces in places. You need the right people in these places, and until you're not going to get a buy-in from people like you from just rolling somebody out and saying, "Hey, I want to introduce you." People want to already know who that person is.
But see, Larry. But when you are not about change, you're about smoke and mirrors to show the image that I am doing something, but what I'm doing is never going to hit the road rubber, never going to hit the road running. I'm not going to be selective by putting people who can make a difference, who committed, like a Pastor Wall or Larry Ellison or Jamal Crawford or Deputy Bradley or who the case may be. I'm not going to put those people in place because if I put them in place and put them at the table, they're going to push in an agenda that's going to actually make changes. I don't want to make changes. I want to give the impression of it.
Okay.
That's what we're dealing with. You know what I mean? And so you're right. People like you, people like Billy Celeste or Jamal, you're not getting to the table. You're not going. In fact, you will never be aware that they're having a meeting, and if you are aware of it, it's long after the meeting has happened. You know what I mean? Because I don't want your input.
Well, short of that, what really changes? I mean, we continue to watch the violence because I people talk. I was talking on the ride in with Pastor Hobbs, and I was saying people talk about the body counts. Unfortunately, the number of deaths we have. Right, we have also in the city a lot of shots fired and multiple rounds at one time. That potentially, if for instance you have a place where there's 13 bullets recovered, 13 rounds recovered. That could be 13 more homicides. Just fortunate. I mean, and a lot of times when these calls come in now, they're not one round. They're multiple rounds that are taking place. And we kind of gloss over that in like this, we literally dodged a bullet.
Yeah, but that still represents violence, though.
That's my point.
You're not actually, you're looking, okay, the net result of the violence is murder, so therefore we're going to actually count that. But I'm not counting the fact that someone attempted to murder someone.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? That creates fear, and fear can be much more pernicious to society than crime itself because it puts everybody in that state of not functioning, not moving.
So, gentlemen, let's pivot to solutions, right? So, Jamal, Mayor Wu calls you in as a senior advisor. Dr. Bradley calls you in as senior advisor. I'm going to go with you first, Jamal. How do you prepare her to approach this situation and being as brutally honest as you always are with her?
So literally, as I said, one thing I would do is the Deborah Prothero-Stith route. She has a curriculum that addressed violence prevention, how to deal, alternative routes, and all this type of thing, which I think could be very effective in the scholastic levels for younger kids, elementary, and on up to high school. Then there's actually the other approach of like what's happening with stuff now. For whatever reason, folks have really still not got hold of this whole gun thing. And, there was a lady at the time who had the nonprofit. I think she kind of fell off a little bit. I haven't heard as much from her. But it was, where did the gun come from? And I'm not bigging up the nonprofit, but the question itself is exactly where we need to be at. So now there's ghost guns as well, so people are making them. But still, mainly people are getting these guns from somewhere. And unlike when I was a kid, when you had to wait for the Greyhound bus to come up from Alabama or Mississippi or Atlanta or whatever, now these folks are getting it right here, Maine, New Hampshire,
Right.
Vermont, an hour and a half away, whatever. But these guns are coming in, and there really needs to be something done about that. And then the other thing too is some of these people that we prop up as mentors and leaders, we need to really examine that, because to the point of who's not at the table, forget the decision-making table, but the people who they choose to bring in front of these young men as examples and mentors are often struggling with the same things of the young men that they're trying to quote-unquote counsel.
Yeah.
So, like for instance, I drink a lot. I wouldn't want to be a counselor for some young man who's struggling with drinking too many beers.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Next thing you know, we're smashing the 12-pack out back. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense.
Boy,
Right?
you get an honest answer from Joel.
Yeah.
So I pose this question to Dr. Bradley, and then a follow-up for you both, because see what we're dealing with as far as leadership here in Boston is an outdated recommendation, a St. Clair's report, right, which really dismantled really finding the best and qualified people that look like us, right, and where we kind of and we modified it somewhat, but we're kind of living by that rule, and we're overlooking talent and people who are actually doing the work. So there's really no incentive for a lot of people to even do anything, because the projection to get you there is so long, and it takes such a long trajectory to get there. So, and Dr. Bradley, you've worn two hats, and you still wear two hats, I should say, academia as well as in the law enforcement field. What would be your conversation with Mayor Wu?
I think my conversation would start out that she has to think outside of the box, because all the solutions are not necessarily political. And I think I would actually find, I would encourage her to look around her and find people who are actually addressing the issues in their own little way, and try to see if you can bring those individuals on board, and then put your power behind those individuals. I think Jamal just made a very good hit. Was like, I think he talked about a lady who had a curriculum. Okay, what is that curriculum, and how can that curriculum be used on a grander scale? To start helping parents. One parent who's dealing with the issue. I think what happens is that we so often try to take public policy and put it and confine it into this political arena, and then because it's in this political arena, we are unaware of what's going on outside of that arena that could help the public policy that we're trying to push.
Right. So one of the things that I found that historically for us, for black folk, is that because Billy Celeste was kind of the model for that, and we got Mayor Wu to commit to putting deputy superintendents back in charge of district stations, because currently right now we have no black commanders of any area district in the city of Boston. Every district is in control and operation of white males.
How about two? I thought two.
No, he's out injured, so he's not back yet. I think he's just coming back, and we don't know whether he's coming back there. So as it stands right now, we have none that are running any district, and even then, one out of the many it's not sufficient. The mayor committed to that, and then she's kind of walking it back. Right, that would be a step in one, honoring your commitment that you ran when you ran for mayor, is that you committed to doing it. But it would also bring some diversity, and it has to be the right people in these roles. Right now, we have no women running any station.
But my question, and being at that level before, and when I say at that level, I mean the command staff level, which is very, very political. And why is she pushing back? Why is she stepping back from that commitment?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer, but like I said, I think it's the politics, right, of folks, right? Because some folks don't want to be having other folks don't look like them telling them what to do.
That's right.
But that's just reality, right? It's politics, yes. But we have folks who have no police powers who are in leadership, right? But very few of them look like us.
But the individuals who are currently in leadership do not look like you and I.
No.
All right. No. And those individuals have people that they know who can influence the mayor's decision.
And a recent controversy, Jamal and Dr. Bradley, was Commissioner Cox bringing back Nicole Taub. There was an article in the paper who was a former chief legal counsel for the police department. A lot of controversy over her is brought back. I think it really hurts moving forward when we're going backwards.
Why would he bring someone like that back?
Go ahead, Jamal.
Go on, Jamal.
Okay, so this struck me as funny when I was listening to the last hour when Senator Collins called in, and he was like, the mass convention center, they have 13 members. They operate Boston and Springfield, 13 members. Only one is African American, and that's statewide, right?
Yes.
Okay, now right here in the little old city of Boston, you said how many police districts are there?
There's 5, but then you break it down. So there's probably, let's see, you have A1, so they have one captain down there. So B2, B3 has one, that's 3. Area C, C11, C6, that's 5. And then we go to area E, there's another 3, that's 8, 9. So roughly around 15 captains in the district.
Okay,
yeah.
and that's my point.
Yeah.
So if we look at the police, precincts, districts, whatever y'all call them up here, I always get confused. If we look at those, it's just like the mass convention center.
On steroids.
You got 15 of them, right? And you got nobody in leadership. What you said, you got one, but he's out on injury. And not for nothing, we need to interview him. We find out he slipped in the shower. They put down the soap. Got to make sure the brother wasn't sabotaged.
Yeah.
But that's real. And if we look at it like that, just the levels, and when we're talking about statewide, Massachusetts is a big place. So it's more difficult to make a case for us. He was making a case, well, Boston and Springfield is, the most diverse places, but the rest of Massachusetts, you get in the middle, it gets lily white, right? But here in Boston, it's very diverse. And to say right here in Boston, you got 15 different district opportunities for leadership.
Right.
And that none or only one is occupied by, a person of color.
Right.
And then, of course, women, and then, of course, Latino, whatever.
Right.
I mean, we could do a lot better.
And to that point, Jamal, we have a solution that is very simple as far as there is nothing that impedes you from it other than you having the courage to do it, right? There is nothing that prohibits it. We're looking at an antiquated recommendation. And when you look at, because people say, well, the St. Clair's report, this was after Charles Stewart murdered his wife and unborn child, right? And then leapt to his death after he blamed a black man for doing so. That recommendation at the time, in my opinion, was racist from its conception, because it was a recommendation that they not promote anyone to the command staff, meaning deputy or superintendent or chief, below the rank of lieutenant, right? We had no lieutenants of color, black or brown, at that time. So you want to implement a policy right off the rip that is racist. And of course, when they did that, they knew that. Right.
And
we've been following that.
But on the other side of it, the consent decree that Boston had with the DOJ that talked about having diversity in rank all throughout the city, all throughout the police department. They refuse to implement that. Correct. But they go to this St. Clair's commission that is inherently biased.
Right. Not inherently. Take out the inherently.
Okay. But my point here is that they pick and choose what they want to actually adhere to.
Just like the drug test, right? Find one that is biased against us. Oh, we'll take 3 of those, right? Jamal, stand by. I want to bring this other caller in. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Now, all 3 of y'all respectfully brought up the word leadership, huh? And leadership can be, the word itself can have different meanings to different people. For me, leadership is about a leader, singular, that knows what he or she job is and leads by example, and also take criticism and also hold him or herself accountable for their actions, including the consequences.
No, I agree. So I'm going to pose the same question I posed to Jamal, because the reason why I do this, because Billy Celesta was someone in the community that, not just Jamal, but I mean, I would walk with him and people would just be coming up to him. They knew of him, they knew of someone that they could call. I ask you, do you have a a personal relationship with anyone in leadership in the Boston Police Department that you can call. If there's a problem, because see, this is where I say this, because a lot of times people would call Billy about things that were going to happen or who did it, right? Because they felt comfortable with that. That's not going to happen if you don't have a relationship with that person. Do you have that type of relationship with anyone in leadership?
Crickets.
Dicko?
No, I don't.
You guys are making my point.
And most community members would say the same thing,
Right.
if not all of them.
So
I do not have that
I
kind of
ask
relationship.
you, right, Jamal, do you think that is crucial in moving people who don't have a trust in law enforcement? You and I had to build a relationship to where it is now. It didn't come. I can't just bring and introduce you to someone and you're gonna say, yeah, okay, I'm gonna pour my heart out to them. It takes time. It takes building. And I think we've gotten away from that. So then you give the pulpit to people who want to define it in a way that now you find it, disrespectful, or why are they labeling it as the triangle of death?
So let me tell you, at least for me, one of these things that softened the blow for me, not just Mr. Sylvester, because Mr. Sylvester, of course, he went to school with my mother and my father before he became a cop and all that. I forget what little gang he was in back in the day.
Matsu.
Yeah, there you go. Marcel Dukes. There you go. Right. And all that type of stuff. So from old school stuff, I knew him, so I'm comfortable with that. But then really what happened is when I was a young man and I'm in high school, do you know Earl Jacobs?
I do. Jamal, we get some feedback on your end. I don't know if there's something close to you that
No,
okay.
I'm just talking regular.
Okay. So
You got a radio on the back there or something?
Nothing.
Dicko,
No,
do you have
nothing.
are you listening on the internet? You're mute.
Okay. Can y'all hear me better?
Yeah, now we're good.
That's better.
Okay, great. All right, so I was just saying, so when I was a kid in high school, one of my friends was Earl. Now I get what? Mike Jacobs?
Earl Jacobs.
Yeah. Earl Jacobs, exactly. So, he was a cut up in school and all that, boy. We had many crack sessions and all that, cool dude, Earl. Oh, and then as we grew up, certain people went off and did this and did that, and he became a cop.
Mm-hmm.
That actually helped for me demystify some of the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my other buddies, Mingo.
Yeah.
Troy Hartgrove.
Yeah.
Right? So it helped demystify, because before that I was like, cops are like from the planet Copatron. Like it's something super foreign.
Yeah.
But now when it was dudes that I knew, that I grew up with, and I don't know if you know Troy. He used to be a heck of a rapper back in the day.
Yeah, I know the whole family. Troy, Chris.
I sing and all this type of stuff, and so it was like, wow, these are regular people. They're not sellouts. They're not the enemy. They're not undermining black people. So it allowed me to see all y'all as more human. And from those generational things of having an OG like a Sylvester, I was like, oh, he knew my mother and father. So now, people that I was like, I went to high school with him.
Right.
Or that's my homeboy's older brother or older cousin or whatever. It just demystified it. That helped a lot. And that speaks to the part of those of y'all who actually lived in the hood, came from here, and all that. Because if you came from, Low Minister or something, I have no, commonality with you. But now it's like, wow, we know same people. We went to Juneteenth together. We ate the same barbecue. Our aunts know each other.
Yeah.
So that type of familiarity, I think, kind of helps, and it doesn't have to be this cops versus the robber. I don't mess with the police. Wow, he's a regular dude. Your mother and his mother grew up together. That's so we have to me, get back to that and stop, to me, viewing y'all as something other.
Right, but that's where the credibility, that's where the relationship part is key and crucial, and we've kind of gotten away from that, or we put all that emphasis on one individual.
But just to piggyback on what Jamal is saying, I also think the department has to work to make sure that those individuals who are on the force, who pretend to think that they're beyond human beings when they get a badge or a gun, are not actually causing that thought that Jamal had about police officers. He changed it because he know people who are on the force. But we have some police officers who get out there and they treat people as if they're less than human because they have the authority. And the department has to change that culture immediately by making sure that that officer is either removed or trained to a point where that he has changed his behavior, and that behavior doesn't change, that he's immediately removed so that he doesn't pollute that thought.
But that's where it said with that leadership, if you know, right, that you know, like if you have children, they know which parents might be the weaker one, right? And they usually will gravitate to that one if they've done something wrong. If you know that your leadership, no matter which one, it will not tolerate that, not just the commissioner, but all of your leadership will not tolerate that. That's a very strong message. But also that people have a reputation of fighting the wrongs, right? When you can give anybody a job, but what's your background that says, okay, you've done something that shows that you're willing to take on the establishment when they're wrong?
But that means that the organization has to have embedded into his modus operandi, dealing with selecting the individuals to actually be in that upper middle management and lower management, the frontline management, who will not tolerate that. But if you perpetuating that nonsense by selecting people who did it as a patrol officer, they're not going to chastise, or I shouldn't say chastise, is a bad word. I should say correct people behavior who are now doing it when they are actually in the position.
That's
to
why
do so.
this recent reappointment of this individual as his chief of staff is causing such a stir. Because
it is really, really bad. I mean, that particular individual, if that's his chief of staff, then I can imagine what's happening for officers of color. Officers of color will get handled differently than people that are not. And that individual has she has a behavior, she has a history of behaving that way, I should say.
And I didn't put that on you. That's what, and that was what people were saying it. So they're saying the quiet part out loud. Dick, do you have anything else you wanted to say before we let you go, sir?
No, but it's a great show.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Continue to listen. Now, you're listening to At the Roundtable with Man Wheel. The calling number is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. See, I think there's a moment here right now where Mayor Wu really is going to have to decide, in my opinion, which direction she wants to go. And she's really going to have to make some changes, some real wholesale changes in what people see as least. You can't define it as putting labels on it and putting people in positions that people just aren't going to buy into. They don't know them. They don't trust them. And a lot of times they don't have the experience. A lot of them, I'm looking at, they're transplants. They're not. They don't know. Boston is not New York. People try to compare. Boston is Boston.
Boston is Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we have our issue, but I'm so disappointed that he selected that.
The Globe did a story the other day, and it was, and our current president, Dr. Lopes, he spoke out, and I mean, there's a history. I know myself, having but President Mamlin, a lot of what I had to deal with was his now current chief of staff. So I can only imagine what the anxiety that they have when you already know someone's reputation that precedes them.
To think that a person of color brought her back, and he knows that he was there. It leads me to believe that he was told this was going to be your chief of staff.
It's quite alarming. So Jamal, you said the triangle death. Yeah, and like I said, it's something that sticks with people. It's the quote that grabbed you when you read the article, right? If you look at the dots, because they put those in there, you look on the city of Boston, the police department, you'll see where these homicides are taking place, and they're really concentrated in those areas. I don't think there's been any in South Boston this year. I don't think there's been any in West Roxbury that I'm aware of this year. There's been shots fired in those neighborhoods, but the concentration of the murders have been in those areas.
Yeah, but see, and this is what I mean. So this is where people can take a certain set of facts and use it to their advantage.
You mean like Fox?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's exactly it. and it's like it's alarmist and all these type of things. What you just said and what you described is the same as in any. Let's go to Chicago. Where do all the murders happen in Chicago? Mainly in the inner city of Chicago.
And you know what, Jamal? Not to cut you off, and I'll let you finish. Because someone just pointed out, because I was saying to someone, they were saying, "Hey, I'm getting ready to go to Chicago." I said, "Man, Chicago dangerous." He said, "There's 60. I think he said it might have been 68 boroughs or something." He said, and it's maybe 4 or 5 areas that this is concentrated in. It's a very small, and I thought it was the whole place that was out of control. So go ahead and finish. But your point you were bringing is like, because I just said to somebody, because I don't know Chicago, and same thing, people don't know Boston. A lot of people are living their lives every day enjoying Boston in certain neighborhoods, but certain neighborhoods.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oprah don't got them problems in Chicago.
No.
Okay. R. Kelly didn't have those problems until he created his own set of problems in Chicago.
Right.
You know, what have you? Look, I got cousins out there. The area where they're from is called the Psycho Ward.
The Psycho? Like Psycho?
Psycho, like Psycho crazy.
Okay. I just want to be clear.
The Psycho Ward. It's one of those places. And, you know, and I met a bunch of kids out there, you know, all nice enough kids, but no, it is the hood. And I was like, wow, this is deep. You know, and I've been to L.A., I've been to Detroit, I've been to, you know, but once again, the set of circumstances you just described, that's not new. That's everywhere. It's happening in the inner city, and then the outskirts are fine. Or, you know, every city got the little yuppies and the architects and the doctors and whatnot, and wherever they live, it's good. Even in Brooklyn, you know, you got grimy Brooklyn, and then you got pricey Brooklyn. You know what I mean? And even if we narrow down those maps even more, let's take Roxbury. Roxbury, death, destruction on every corner. Yes. All right, but then let's go to Fort Hill. It's less there. Less, you know, Highland Park. It's less there.
Right.
So there's even certain pockets in certain neighborhoods. You know where Mel Miller lives over there. What's that park over there? Horatio Harris Park. Between Malcolm X Park and like where the Black Museum is,
right,
on Walnut.
Backside. It's right, Walnut. It's like you would think you were in some little suburban town, right? Another place is Melville Ave, right? Go down to those, right? I mean, you're talking about multi-million-dollar homes.
And so really the crux is when we really draw these lines. Instead of what people do geographically, you could really do it based on economics and poverty. Okay, that's the real thing. The death and destruction is happening mostly where people have the least, want the most, and have, you know, no hope. To counter Jesse Jackson's thing, they have no hope but a bunch of dope. That's where it's going on.
No, and you know what? To your point you just raised, right? Because I've said this before, and I know Dr. Bradley would probably be in agreement. And you know, it comes with the job. I've made numerous arrests over my career. I have never arrested anybody making over $75,000 a year. Because when they do the booking process, you ask for employment, and you can just tell when they tell you what they do, right? Most people, you're right. If they are employed and they're making a good living, right, and it's gainful employment, they're not less willing to risk that for something.
Or it's the type of crime. If you arrested somebody over $75,000 a year,
it's no UI.
I was going to say, damn, it was drunk driving.
Right.
Coming from a function.
Right. But not from a shooting.
But that leads
right, and it might have been a firefighter.
Or a city councilor.
Or another cop.
Or a city councilor, but we won't go.
Or a city councilor. Or a preacher.
Okay now. But that leads back to what T. Michael Thomas was talking about. You know, having an outlet for these kids to show them, you know, teach them a skill, an employable skill that they can go out and make some decent money and actually make money well enough to sustain a decent lifestyle. But it also what
Senator Collins has said, right?
Absolutely.
He said, look, you know, people are on a fixed income. Wages aren't keeping up. But you want rent control, but you're not controlling wages. So instead of saying, oh, we need to slow down the rent, how about increasing people's pay especially if you're working for the city. I'm sure Jamal be in agreement with like me. If you work for the city, how about increasing it, to where, because you have city councilors who say, oh, you don't pay me enough for this job, but you're making more than a teacher or a police officer or firefighter's base pay. Not the if you have to work all these extra hours, because it's like having two jobs if you have to work all these details and overtime. But the base pay, if you just wanted to go home at a normal after you finish your 40-hour week, is less than a city councilor. How do you justify that for frontline people, teachers, firefighters, EMTs, and such? Important. But a city councilor makes more than them, and it just doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. So I mean, again, the solutions are there. What we need to actually have real discussions.
So we have the courage and the will.
Yeah.
Jamal, do you think we're heading in that direction, or this is just another conversation we'll have? We see some meaning out of it. But will they call people like us to the table? I don't think so.
So not for nothing, so in some regards, we're at the table right now. So, for instance, you're on the post committee. I was on the Boston police reform thing. But then what ends up happening, too, another thing is, you could be at the table and they listen to everything you say. You know how many people have paid me money for my consultation to take my advice? They listen to all my advice. It might be 30 things I tell them to do. They be like, wow, that's all great. And then they don't do any of them.
Okay.
So with the police reform thing, at least for me, we're having a problem right now with the OPAC because myself, Tanisha Sullivan, literally created OPAC.
Yeah.
And it ain't what we was imagining.
Well, right. But not only that, Jamal, to that point there, I don't know if you saw that the city contracted Conan Harris, which is, for full disclosure, is Ayanna Presley's husband. The initial report, because I interviewed with him, it's really lackluster, to say the least. If their preliminary is anything going to be like their final, it's not. It's like there's no game change in there. And
hold on. They've already issued a preliminary report.
Yeah.
Oh, please send it to me.
I will. Yeah.
If it's public, it's public.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Did they spell preliminary right?
I have to check. Cause
okay, yeah, right.
Jamal, you didn't go there, man. Jamal,
that's a tricky one. You can get that messed up with luminary.
Well,
you know what I mean?
They always say sometimes you get what you pay for, right? And maybe that's what you wanted, right? Because a reputable place, there's no way that they could, take all. I know, even just from what I said, should have been enough to be eye-opening. I'm not saying you take just that on its face, but there's been proven. All of the lawsuits that I know, even under my term as president of Mamleo, that we filed and have been successful showing discrimination. You didn't need, all you had to do was just take that and say, okay, what have the courts said you've been doing wrong to this segment of the population? And let's work on fixing that. I haven't heard, like I said, Jamal, I'm not sure particularly what OPAT was set up to do other than oversight and law enforcement. Because you're right, I don't know what they've done. Maybe you can enlighten us.
Oh, well, let me say this, because I'm going to try to be politically correct for this once. All I'm going to say is, we created it and we gave them the power of everything. Lightsabers, everything. We envisioned them as the warriors of justice. And then what happened is, and so all I can say is, if you go and you look at the press, whether it's the Globe, the Herald, whoever, ever since their inception, every article that has come out about them has been critical. So this is not Jamal Crawford is hating again. It's not that type of scenario. Everybody who's somebody, from the liberal side, from the conservative side, they've all said this is not what it's cracked up to be. Wow. So all I can say is that for me, it has got off to a very slow start. Wow. They haven't really done enough. There's questions for me about the leadership and their commitment to the initial intent in which it was created. They've deviated, in my view, from the original intent.
So, Jamal, we've got about a minute and a half. So, I can say, and I'm not tooting our own horn, but I know at the Post, we've had a larger task, and I think we've gotten quite a bit accomplished, a lot more than I thought we would be able with having to start something just like they did from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
But they only had Boston to deal with. We had the whole state to deal with, and we're up and running and doing things. And people, not everyone's happy, but they're seeing progress. They're seeing accountability because it's out in the public domain. So I'm not speaking out of school here or any. Because we're under the open meeting.
So it can be done.
We're
with the right-
decertifying. You
Yeah.
know, all of what was designed for is being implemented.
Okay, so it can be done.
It can be
if
done.
you have the right people and the right
Yeah.
forces behind it.
Absolutely.
It can be done. So
Right.
what Jamal is doing at the city level can also be done. But what's happening is that the city government is not behind it.
Well, somebody's not. Jamal, sir, any final? We got 30 seconds. I want to give it to you, sir.
That's it. God bless y'all. I love y'all, brothers,
All right.
and keep it
All
on.
right, and don't forget to set your clock ahead an hour.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Jamal, again, man, thank you for that book. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's great.
It's good information.
And
Good
you're
information.
right. It should be required reading for every
Everyone,
police
yeah.
officer.
And I was gonna say, and y'all
across
as
the
law
state.
enforcement officers, spread that gospel to other people that y'all know who would enjoy that.
What I'm gonna do is, Jamal, I'm gonna recommend it to the MPTC, which is the training component.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give him my copy, the director over there, and say, hey, take a look at this. This is something you might want to implement. Matter of fact, if you I'll set up a meeting with him, with you, so you can explain to him as well.
It's important.
All right,
It's
and-
important for
and-
officers to know that we're not always on the right side of the issue.
Exactly.
And all of y'all can get it at a discount from Frugal Bookstore because Frugal Bookstore offers a 10% discount to all city employees.
Okay, we'll do like Ron DeSantis. His people make it look like he's doing something good. They buying his books in bulk and giving them away. Thank you, brother. I'll see you in the morning.
All right.
Yes,
Take care.
sir.
All right. Be blessed. Well, that's going to do it for us, Dr. Bradley. You've been listening at the Round Table Memo. Enjoy the rest of your day. And as you always say,
Be blessed.
all right.
See ya, never get the chance to meet ya. No, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog.
I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge if your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies you ain't